Coronavirus. Back to business and politics as usual? No. Enact Constitutional Amendment number 28. The philosopher mathematician Gottfried Leibniz, in his 1710 work entitled Essays of Theodicy on the Goodness of God, the Freedom of Man, and the Origin of Evil, is credited for saying that this is the best of all possible worlds. Bad can always be worse, not only better. In all earnestness, we are blessed, all things considered. The argument is tricky and requires your undivided attention. My recommendation is that you form study and action groups for having fun, connecting, and for making long-view changes. Please allow me to lead. The establishment has always been broken, but didn't break down, kept chugging along with fixes till the coronavirus came along and gave it its coup de grace. It hasn't been able and can't get fully started with the ongoing challenge of life-threatening infections, in spite of haphazardly throwing big-time money at it. Let me state it in no uncertain terms. The system was chronically broken till it acutely had a nervous breakdown with stay-at-home lockdown of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. Alas, sadly, my work is timely. No quick and easy fixes this time around. Thanks to the coronavirus, the triad conditions for creativity is finally conjugate to achieve justice in this world. The conditions needed and now finally met are the chronic crisis of civilization D, the acute death pandemic R, and the spare time lockdown P. The coronavirus has upended the world as we know it for better and for worse. Previously, we would get lost delving on the anecdotal of party opinion and never reaching consensus worth mentioning. The silver lining in all this is that it has highlighted the brokenness of our whole system, lock, stock, and barrel, and the urgency to reconstitute it from scratch, for nothing short of wholeness will meet expectations. Politics and business as usual of background dealings and platitude speeches won't cut it this time around. This isn't just another episode of the human saga. Rather, is the culmination of 3,000 years of dualism and idolatry of this civilization. Just like all trees reduced to one forest, likewise, all questions reduced to the relationship between humanism and deism, of reason and truth, ultimately, of the nature of the relationship between creation and creator. The latest version of civilization is the Enlightenment project dating from 18th century Europe, which in turn inspired the founding fathers of the Constitution of the United States of America of 1789. The U.S. Constitution is as good as the reasoning that went in its making of the American Enlightenment. Moreover, if reason has improved, and that's our claim with paradise, then we would need to upgrade the second millennium Constitution to third millennium universal standards. Before the coronavirus, politics was pretty much about the mechanics of how to preserve the color of things or else flip its color, all the while leaving the status quo unmoved. Business wasn't that much different. The rich getting richer and the middle class disappearing, all the while the American dream verily fading into nighttime oblivion. Our politicians speak with forked tongue, to borrow and adapt a Native American idea. This pretty much characterizes the partisan discourse of both red and blue leadership. It looks oh so nice on paper, much like socialism and fascism in their heyday. As for life, what can I say? I miss the broken, corrupt, and misguided old normal. Not really, though I can't complain. I didn't have it that bad, in spite of not being able to make ends meet with my teaching and Social Security pensions, living day to day and slowly but surely sinking into belly-up debt. But socially, it was nice to be able to move around in my habits. No one knows what you have till you lose it. The one thing that's certain in these times of uncertainty is that business and politics and life as usual won't be coming back anytime soon. Nevermore, I would venture to say. We need to turn the corner once and for all. We need to team up to deliver the paradise re-civilization model of democracy 21st century plus. A good place to start is by expounding on the shortcomings and assets of the neoliberal democracy model of globalization as data and go beyond it. Which is the best to worst case scenarios? Is there going to be a quick rebound? Not likely. Similar with a real car collision, with a real life car collision. Costly repairs, if not total loss, and numerous inconveniences, injuries, and certainly never the same after the wreck for both cars and drivers and all parties concerned. I've been promoting this innovative idea of recivilization in its present form of paradise since 2016 and as triads since 2012. On the practical side, as worldly means to achieve this noble end, I ran back in 2016 for the Austin City Council District Number 3. Later on, in 2018, I failed to qualify to register my candidacy for the U.S. House District 21. Of late, locally, I'm running for the U.S. Senate Texas 2020 and globally bidding for the Nobel Peace Prize 2021 or as soon as possible. Now, after giving the problem of the crisis of civilization a human face, let's go back to the issue in question of how to rebuild from our breakdown and previously broken world. One choice is to continue with business as usual out of the force of inertia. But on whose shoulders will the burden rest? After World War II, 50% of the population owned 50% of the wealth. By 2020, 1% owns 50%. And now soon is going to be 1% owning 80%. Not unexpectedly, the darker the skin, the freer the fall to poverty. And this is just in the United States, the land of the brave and home of the free. Worldwide, the impact is worse, with extreme poverty increasing as well as the danger of famine. This creates social stress conditions that need addressing so as to be prepared for when the time comes, which is only months away, starting with 2020, the year of the coronavirus. A not so great way to start the decade. My concern is based on the following facts on the ground. A spark is all that's needed to blow us up all like a nuke meltdown carried in our belly. The main risk factors are as follows. There are enough assault weapons out there to start a civil war of titanic proportions. The economic background is dire. The rhetoric is viral both on the part of Donnieist fascism and of Bernieist socialist revolution. Bernieist and Donnieist going for each other's throats, fighting for street control with a Joeist merely onlooking. All are perfect conditions for social strife, and what's worse, it is not limited to our borders, it is worldwide. The system is past its breaking point. The pandemic was a straw that broke the camel's back, though it was 3,000 years in the making with plenty of warning signs along the way. It went from chronic brokenness of the crises to acute breakdown of civilization due to the pandemic coronavirus lockdown. So then, let's say yes to paradise recivilization peace and say no to socialist fascist revolution chaos. To that effect, let's go to the drawing board, laying out the United States Constitution to make the pertinent changes in the aftermath of the coronavirus. I am not a one-man band, certainly not a know-it-all. For this endeavor, I am making a calling to all concerned and interested parties to team up in coming up with a working model of paradise recivilization. This draft of a project requires formulating the triad state for the nation, and by extension to the world, as optimal cultural model of economic and political growth and wealth distribution. The recommended procedure is applying paradise as triad state made up of executive, legislative, and universal branches of government. The starting point is defining the universal power R as catch-all of all rights, which are neither essentially public government D nor private market P of the state S, as affirmed in the Constitution in Amendment number 9, quote, retained by the people, unquote, or else in Amendment number 10, quote, reserved to the people, unquote. Let's do it step by step for the sake of clarity. Let's concentrate here on the political aspect underlying our society as found in our Constitution. Triad deal best yet. The triad state made up of triad powers, PRD in one state S, that is, executive P, universal R, legislative D in state S. Let's focus on the small print of the triad state project by doing a quick rundown of relevant articles, sections, and amendments referring to the novel universal power of the United States government. Let's start with the articles and sections of the Constitution of the United States of America. The Legislative, Article 1, Section 8, quote, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, unquote. The Executive, Article 2, Section 2, quote, he shall have power and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to appoint judges of the Supreme Court, unquote. The Judicial, Article 3, here the modification suggested would be substituting quote, universal power, unquote, in place of, quote, judicial power, unquote. Now, on to the changes of the U.S. Constitution founded on Amendments 9 and number 10. Amendment number 9, quote, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, unquote. Amendment number 10, quote, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, unquote. I'm proposing direct voting of the members of the universal power by the people or else solely by the knowledge-driven population of the schools, colleges, and universities. The proposal of amendment reform to the U.S. Constitution is as follows. Amendment number 28, quote, the universal branch of government will be the catch-all of all rights which are what neither public government nor private market of the state as understood by Amendment number 9, quote, retained by the people, unquote, or else by Amendment number 10, quote, reserved to the people, unquote. The universal power, union of knowledge, university, and grassroots community would be in charge of the judiciary, healthcare, high-tech startups, work assurance, education, and so on to pursue justice. In retrospect, three powers in broken state of executive, legislative, and judicial was close but not quite right in adherence to the 18th century Enlightenment project of reason. In its place, we're proposing updating it to the triad powers, PRD in one state SS, executive P, universal R, legislative D in whole state S. The universal will be voted by the schools, colleges, and universities. Alliance Community Grassroots with Knowledge University as universal power. Best deal yet is to make the state triad, that is, the triad state of executive, legislative, and universal powers. Now, for purposes of contrast and comparison, I'll mention the constitutional reforms which will be required in the case of Mexico. Mention is made at the outset that the American legal system is based on the British Magna Carta of oral tradition, while that of Mexico is based on Roman law of written tradition. While the oral American Constitution consists of a few pages, the written tradition of the Mexican Constitution is hundreds of pages long. While the former would simply require the addition of Amendment number 28, the latter would require changes all across the founding document, too numerous to mention. Notwithstanding the differences, however, the core idea is the same. The relevant parts of the Mexican Constitution of 1912 are as follows. Title 2, Chapter 1, Article number 39. Quote, the national sovereignty resides essentially and originally in the people. All public power emanates from the people and is instituted for their benefit. The people have at all times the inalienable right to alter or modify the form of its government, unquote. Additionally, let me mention Title 3, Chapter 1, Division of Powers, Article 49. Quote, the federal government is divided for its exercise into legislative, executive, and judicial, unquote. Chapter 2, the legislative power. Chapter 3, the executive power. Chapter 4, the judicial power. Comparatively speaking, the key parts of the U.S. Constitution are Amendments number 9 and number 10, all the while in the Mexican Constitution it will be Article 39. Though very differently phrased, nevertheless, the idea is the same, that ultimately it is the people who have the inalienable right to modify its constitution in its best interests. In this case, the proposed reform would be in the above titles, chapters, and articles, and would take the form of Amendment number 28. The modern broken state, based on Enlightenment reasoning, made it consist of three powers or branches of government, namely executive, legislative, and judicial. But why? On what principle in turn is it based on? On dualism of two opposing principles, and was not clearly in either one would go to the twilight fudge zone, splitting the differences, placing it on checks and balances. In practice, these checks and imbalances is just leaving things to manual adjustment what the mental principles couldn't clearly assign. So then, paradise is panacea, but it is not a magic wand. It still needs to be thoroughly applied all across the board of human activities to be effective. By applying it, we do our part, and in the process achieve transmutation onto our better selves. It needs to be applied all across the board in order to find a cure for a myriad of things, starting with COVID-19, for replacing neoliberal democracy model, for fighting dualism, for doing away with duocracy. Duocracy is two-party authoritarian rule like the chokehold that the Republican and Democratic parties have on our American democracy. Once we've settled the constitutional requirement by way of enacting Amendment number 28, pending polishing of the concept in hands of professionals, the next thing is how that would actually roll out in practice. Needless to say, this requires all hands on deck to meet the challenge of paradise re-civilization. Coronavirus aftermath, getting ahead of the curve. The upside of the pandemic is that the dysfunctional system finally broke down under the weight of the lockdown. Let's take this crisis opportunity to lift ourselves from the ashes for a stellar comeback. The sum-zero dualism of checks and imbalances is a setup for failure. The practical imperative for competitive success for America, face-to-face Europe and Asia, is paradise peace. No socialist fascist chaos. No to re-election. Yes to grassroots democracy. Yours truly, Rick, and GD bless. Austin, Texas, capital of the world.